The lantern swung from Vincent Hayes's calloused hand as he pushed open the barn door, expecting nothing more than the usual sounds of horses shifting in their stalls and the soft rustle of hay settling for the night. Instead, he found a pair of wide, terrified eyes staring at him from the shadows behind the feed barrels, and a woman's trembling voice cutting through the darkness like a prayer. "Please don't turn me in. Just one night, then I'll disappear." Vincent froze, his heart hammering against his ribs as he lifted the lantern higher. The golden light revealed a young woman pressed against the barn wall, her dark hair tangled with straw, her dress torn at the shoulder and stained with dust from hard traveling. She couldn't have been more than 23, maybe 24, and despite the fear etched across her delicate features, there was something fierce burning in those hazel eyes that made him lower the lantern slightly, made him take a breath before speaking. "Who are you running from?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, but he didn't move closer, didn't want to spook her like a wild horse. She swallowed hard, her hands pressed flat against the wooden slats behind her. "It doesn't matter. I just need somewhere to hide until morning." "Then you'll never see me again. I swear it." Vincent Hayes had run his ranch outside Cherry Creek, Nevada for 6 years, ever since his father died and left him 300 acres of scrubland and a herd of cattle that barely kept him above water. It was October of 1882, and the nights were getting cold enough that he could see his breath in the barn. He studied the woman carefully, noting the way she favored her left side, the way her breathing came shallow and pained. She was hurt, and whatever trouble she'd found herself in, it was bad enough to send her running into a stranger's barn in the middle of the night. "You're injured," he said, setting the lantern on a post and keeping his hands visible. "Let me look at it. I'm fine." Her voice cracked on the lie. "You're not fine. You're holding your ribs like they're broken and you can barely stand up straight." Vincent took a slow step forward, then another. "I'm not going to hurt you and I'm not turning you in to anyone. But if you're hurt bad enough, you might not make it through the night out here in the cold." She watched him approach like a cornered animal, her whole body coiled tight with the instinct to bolt. But there was nowhere left to run, and they both knew it. When he was close enough to see the bruises darkening her jaw and the cut above her eyebrow, something hot and angry flared in his chest. "Who did this to you?" "It doesn't matter," she whispered again, but her eyes filled with tears that she blinked back fiercely. "I just need one night." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away and gently touched the torn fabric at her shoulder. She flinched but didn't retreat. "You need more than one night. You need a doctor, food, and somewhere safe to heal. Come up to the house." "I can't. If anyone sees me." "No one's going to see you. My ranch is 5 miles from town, and the only person who comes out here is my ranch hand, and he won't be back until tomorrow afternoon." Vincent met her eyes and held them. "I give you my word, you'll be safe here." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for the lie, the trap, the hidden danger. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she finally nodded just once and let him help her to her feet. She gasped when she tried to straighten, her hand flying to her side, and Vincent caught her before she collapsed. "Easy now," he murmured, slipping an arm around her waist and taking most of her weight. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." The walk from the barn to the house felt like miles, even though it was barely 100 yards. She leaned heavily against him, her breath coming in short, pained gasps that made him want to find whoever had hurt her and return the favor tenfold. Vincent had never been a violent man, had always preferred to settle disputes with words rather than fists. But something about this woman brought out a protective instinct so fierce, it scared him a little. Inside the house, he guided her to the sofa in the front room and helped her sit down carefully. The fire in the hearth had burned down to coals, and he quickly added more wood, building it back up until warmth flooded the room. She watched him work, her arms wrapped around her middle, shivering despite the growing heat. "What's your name?" Vincent asked as he filled a basin with water from the pump in the kitchen and grabbed clean cloths from the cupboard. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Helena. Helena Turner." "Vincent Hayes." He knelt beside the sofa and wrung out one of the cloths. "I'm going to clean that cut on your face, and then I need to look at your ribs." "Is that all right?" Helena nodded, her eyes tracking his every movement as he gently dabbed at the dried blood above her eyebrow. She had a beautiful face, he realized, even beneath the bruises and the fear. High cheekbones, a strong jawline, and those hazel eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders in waves that would probably shine in the sunlight, and her hands, though rough from work, had long, elegant fingers. "This might sting," he warned before pressing the cloth against the cut. She hissed in pain but didn't pull away. "Who did this to you, Helena?" "My husband." The words came out flat dead. "My late husband now, I suppose." Vincent's hand stilled. "He's dead. I killed him 3 days ago." She met his eyes without flinching. "He came at me with a knife after I told him I was leaving. We fought, and I grabbed the fireplace poker and hit him. I didn't mean to kill him, but I hit him hard enough that he went down and didn't get back up. So I took what little money I had hidden away and I ran." The stark honesty in her voice, the lack of remorse or shame, told Vincent everything he needed to know about what kind of man her husband had been. He'd seen enough battered women in town, seen the way they flinched from loud voices and sudden movements, seen the excuses they made for bruises that no accident could explain. "Where did this happen?" "Virginia City. I've been traveling on foot mostly, caught a ride on a wagon for part of it. I didn't know where I was going, just knew I had to get away before someone found him and came looking for me." Helena's voice wavered. "They'll hang me if they catch me. Self-defense doesn't mean much when it's a woman who kills her husband." Vincent knew she was right. He'd seen men get away with murder on claims of self-defense for less, but a woman defending herself from her husband. The law wasn't kind to women in general, and it was even less kind to women who fought back. He set aside the cloth and pulled his chair closer, resting his forearms on his knees. "Then we'll make sure they don't catch you, but first I need to check those ribs. Did he do that too?" "He kicked me after I went down, before I grabbed the poker." Helena's jaw tightened. "He liked to hurt me, said it reminded me of my place." The cold fury that swept through Vincent was almost physical. He stood and helped her ease back against the sofa cushions, then carefully lifted the torn fabric of her dress to expose her left side. The bruising there was spectacular, deep purple and black, spreading from her lowest rib up to just below her breast. He pressed gently, feeling for breaks, and she gasped but didn't cry out. "I don't think they're broken," he said after a moment. "Badly bruised, maybe cracked. You'll need to wrap them tight and take it easy for a few weeks. No heavy lifting, no sudden movements." "I can't stay here a few weeks," Helena protested. "I told you just one night. And I'm telling you that if you try to keep traveling in this condition, you'll either re-injure yourself or collapse somewhere between here and wherever you think you're going. You need time to heal." Vincent retrieved a length of clean cotton from his supply chest, the one he kept stocked for ranch injuries, and came back to her. "This is going to hurt, but it'll help. Can you sit up and hold your arms out?" She did as he asked, wincing with every movement, and he began wrapping the cotton around her ribs with practiced efficiency. His mother had been sick for 2 years before she died, and he'd learned how to tend wounds and wrap injuries during those long, difficult months. His hands were steady and gentle, and he could feel Helena gradually relaxing under his touch, the tension leaving her shoulders as she realized he truly meant her no harm. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as he tied off the bandage. "You don't know me." "For all you know, I'm a murderer who deserves to hang." Vincent met her eyes. "Because I believe you when you say it was self-defense. Because no woman should have to run for her life after defending herself from a man who was supposed to protect her. And because it's the right thing to do." Helena stared at him for a long moment, and then, for the first time since he'd found her in the barn, she smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it transformed her face, chasing away some of the fear and exhaustion that had settled there. "Thank you, Vincent. You're welcome. Now, let me get you something to eat. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in days." He wasn't wrong. While he heated up the beef stew he'd made that morning, Helena admitted that she'd been living on whatever she could forage or steal, too afraid to stop anywhere long enough to buy food properly. She'd slept in ditches and under bridges, always moving, always looking over her shoulder for the law or bounty hunters or anyone else who might recognize her from Virginia City. Vincent served her a generous bowl of stew with thick slices of bread, and watched as she ate with the desperation of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly full. She ate 2 bowls, then a third, and he kept refilling her water glass until she finally sat back with a sigh. "That's the best thing I've eaten in months," she said. "Maybe years. My husband wasn't much for providing good food, said I didn't deserve it." "Your husband was a fool," Vincent said quietly, "and a bastard." Helena laughed, a real laugh this time, though it made her clutch her ribs. "He was. I should have left him years ago, but I had nowhere to go. No family, no money, no way to support myself. I thought I was trapped." She looked at Vincent, her expression serious. "But I'm not anymore. Whatever happens now, at least I'm free of him." Vincent collected her empty dishes and carried them to the kitchen, his mind working through the implications of what she'd told him. Virginia City was over 100 miles northeast, which meant she'd been traveling for days, probably longer given her injuries and lack of resources. The law there might be looking for her, but news traveled slowly out in these parts, especially to small towns like Cherry Creek. If she was careful, if she changed her appearance and her name, she might be able to disappear into the endless expanse of the Western Territories. But that would mean leaving, and Vincent found himself oddly reluctant to see her go. He shook his head at the thought. He'd known her for less than an hour. She was a stranger, a fugitive, someone who'd be nothing but trouble if he let her stay. The smart thing to do would be to give her a good night's sleep, some supplies, and send her on her way in the morning. The smart thing to do would be to forget he'd ever seen her. Vincent had never been particularly smart when it came to doing the right thing. When he returned to the front room, Helena had curled up on the sofa, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She fought to stay awake, clearly still wary of falling asleep in a strange man's house, but her body was betraying her. Vincent grabbed a quilt from his bedroom and draped it over her gently. "Sleep," he told her. "I'll be right here in the chair. No one's going to hurt you, I promise." "You don't have to," she murmured, her eyes already closing. "You should sleep in your own bed. I've slept in worse places than this chair. Rest now." She wanted to argue, he could see it in the way her brow furrowed, but exhaustion won out. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into the deep, steady rhythm of sleep. Vincent settled into his armchair and watched the fire burn, his mind too full of questions and possibilities to even think about sleeping himself. The next morning came cold and clear, frost painting the windows in delicate patterns. Vincent woke to find Helena still asleep on the sofa, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd met her. He moved quietly around the house, starting a fire in the kitchen stove and putting coffee on to boil. The familiar routine of morning chores centered him, gave him time to think about what came next. He was frying eggs and bacon when Helena appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in the quilt and moving gingerly. Her hair was a mess of tangles and there were pillow creases on her cheek, but she looked better than she had last night. The rest had done her good. "Morning," Vincent said, gesturing to the table. "Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." "You don't have to keep feeding me," Helena protested, but she sat anyway, wincing as she lowered herself into the chair. "I should go. You've already done more than enough. We talked about this last night. You're not going anywhere until those ribs have had time to heal." Vincent plated the food and set it in front of her, then poured 2 cups of coffee and joined her at the table. "Besides, I could use the help around here. My ranch hand, Tommy, he's good with the cattle, but he's useless at cooking and cleaning. If you're going to stay for a few weeks, you might as well make yourself useful." Helena picked up her fork, studying him carefully. "You're serious. You want me to stay?" "I'm serious. You need somewhere safe to recover, and I need help around the house. Seems like a fair trade to me." Vincent sipped his coffee, meeting her eyes over the rim of the cup. "And before you ask, no, I don't expect anything from you except help with the household chores. You'll sleep in the spare room, you'll eat 3 meals a day, and you'll take it easy until those ribs heal. That's the deal." "Why?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this for someone you don't even know?" Vincent set down his cup and leaned back in his chair. "My mother spent the last 2 years of her life in terrible pain. Cancer, the doctor said, though there wasn't much he could do about it. I took care of her through all of it, watched her waste away until there was nothing left but skin and bones and suffering. And you know what she told me, right before she died? She said that the measure of a man isn't how he treats the people who can help him, but how he treats the people who can't. You can't help yourself right now, Helena. You're hurt and scared and running from something that would see you dead. So I'm going to help you, because that's what my mother taught me, and because it's the right thing to do." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. "I don't deserve your kindness. Everyone deserves kindness, especially people who have had precious little of it in their lives." Vincent pushed his chair back and stood. "Now eat your breakfast before it gets cold. I've got chores to do in the barn, and when I get back, I'll show you where the spare room is so you can get settled." He left her there at the table, tears still streaming down her face, and headed out into the cold morning air. The cattle needed feeding, the horses needed tending, and the mundane normalcy of ranch work would give Helena time to process everything that had happened. He didn't know if she'd still be there when he got back, or if she'd take the opportunity to run again, but he hoped she'd stay. Something about her called to him, something beyond the obvious attraction or the natural desire to protect someone in need. It was like recognizing a kindred spirit, someone else who'd been beaten down by life but refused to stay down. When Vincent returned to the house 2 hours later, stamping frost from his boots, he found Helena in the kitchen washing dishes. She'd managed to brush and braid her hair, and she'd changed into one of his mother's old dresses that he'd pulled from storage. It was too big on her, hanging loose around her thin frame, but it was clean and whole and better than the torn things she'd been wearing. "I found the spare room," she said without turning around. "And I found your mother's clothes in the trunk. I hope you don't mind that I borrowed one." "I don't mind. That's what they're there for." Vincent hung his coat on the peg by the door and joined her at the sink. "You didn't have to do the dishes. You said I'd earn my keep. Besides, I needed something to do with my hands." Helena glanced at him, and he saw that her eyes were red from crying, but there was something steadier in her expression now. "I'm going to stay, for a few weeks until I'm healed, and then I'll move on like I planned. Sounds fair to me." Vincent grabbed a towel and started drying the dishes she'd washed. There's a town about 30 miles south called Silver Springs. It's bigger than Cherry Creek, more opportunities for work. If you want, I can take you there when you're ready, help you get set up. You do that? I would. But let's worry about that later. For now, let's just focus on getting you healed up. He set the last plate in the cupboard and turned to face her. There's one other thing we need to talk about. Tommy's going to be back this afternoon, and he's going to have questions about who you are and what you're doing here. We need to figure out what to tell him. Helena bit her lip, thinking, we could tell him I'm your cousin, come to help with the house for a few weeks. Tommy knows I don't have any cousins. My mother was an only child, and my father only had one brother who died in the war without any children. Vincent crossed his arms, considering. We could say you're a widow who answered an advertisement for a housekeeper. That's common enough that he wouldn't question it. All right. What was my husband's name? Where am I from? They spent the next hour constructing Helena's new identity, smoothing out the details until the story felt real enough to pass casual inspection. She became Helena Turner, a widow from Sacramento whose husband had died in a mining accident 6 months ago. She'd been struggling to make ends meet and had answered Vincent's advertisement for a housekeeper in a San Francisco newspaper. It was simple, believable, and close enough to the truth that Helena wouldn't stumble over the details. When Tommy rode up that afternoon, a lanky 19-year-old with sun-bleached hair and an easy smile, he accepted the story without question. He was more interested in the fact that there would be decent meals again than in where the new housekeeper had come from. Helena served him lunch, moving carefully to hide her injuries, and Tommy chatted easily about the cattle and the upcoming winter and the town gossip from Cherry Creek. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Vincent would wake early and tend to the animals while Helena made breakfast. They'd eat together, talking about everything and nothing, and then Vincent would head out to work the ranch while Helena managed the house. She was a hard worker despite her injuries, tackling laundry and mending and all the domestic tasks that Vincent had been neglecting since his mother died. The house began to feel like a home again, warm and lived in and cared for. In the evenings, after Tommy had ridden back to his cabin on the far end of the property, Vincent and Helena would sit by the fire and talk. She told him about her childhood in Oregon, about losing her parents to fever when she was 16, and marrying her husband at 17 because she had no other options. She told him about the years of abuse, the isolation, the slow death of hope until she'd been nothing more than a ghost haunting her own life. Vincent told her about his father, a hard man who'd ruled the ranch with an iron fist and expected perfection from everyone around him. He told her about his mother, who'd been soft where his father was hard, who'd taught him to read and write and think for himself. He told her about the loneliness of running the ranch alone, about the weight of responsibility and the endless work that never seemed to be finished. They shared pieces of themselves in those quiet evening hours, building something fragile and precious between them. Vincent found himself looking forward to the end of each day, to the moment when he could come inside and find Helena waiting with dinner ready, and a smile that grew warmer each time he saw it. And Helena, for her part, began to relax into the safety of the ranch, the fear gradually leaving her eyes as days passed without any sign of pursuit. 2 weeks after Helena arrived, the first snow came. It was early for snow, even in Nevada, but the storm swept down from the mountains and blanketed the ranch in white. Vincent spent long hours making sure the cattle had shelter and feed, that the water troughs didn't freeze, that everything was secured against the bitter cold. He came in one evening covered in snow, his fingers numb and his face red from windburn, to find Helena standing at the stove making soup. "You look frozen solid," she said, ladling hot broth into a bowl. "Sit down by the fire. I'll bring this to you." Vincent did as he was told, too cold and tired to argue. Helena brought him the soup and a thick blanket, draping it around his shoulders before returning to the kitchen. He watched her move around his house with comfortable familiarity, and something in his chest tightened. She belonged here. The thought came unbidden, but once it arrived, he couldn't shake it. Helena belonged in his house, in his life, in the space beside him that had been empty for so long. It was a dangerous thought. She'd said from the beginning that she was only staying until she healed, and her ribs were already much better. In another week, maybe two, she'd be ready to leave, ready to disappear like she'd promised. And Vincent would be alone again, with nothing but the memory of firelight on her face and the sound of her laugh echoing through empty rooms. He couldn't let that happen. "Helena," he said as she came back into the room with her own bowl of soup, "can we talk?" She settled into the chair across from him, her expression curious. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Vincent set aside his soup, buying himself a moment to gather his thoughts. "You've been here 2 weeks now, and I've been thinking. When you're ready to leave, when your ribs are healed and you want to move on, I'll take you to Silver Springs like I promised. I'll help you get set up with a place to stay and work, make sure you have everything you need." He paused, meeting her eyes. "But I'd rather you stayed here." Helena's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "Vincent, let me finish. I know what we agreed to. One night, then you'd disappear. But things have changed, at least for me. Having you here, it's made me realize how lonely I've been, how much I was just going through the motions of living without actually being alive. You've brought something back to this house, to my life, that I didn't even know was missing." Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I'm not asking you to marry me or make any kind of permanent commitment. I'm just asking you to consider staying longer than a few weeks. Stay through the winter, at least. Give yourself time to figure out what you want to do next without the pressure of having to run." "I don't know what to say." Helena set down her bowl, her hands trembling slightly. "Vincent, you've already given me so much. A place to heal, safety, kindness. I can't keep taking from you without giving anything back. You have given something back. You've given me companionship, conversation, someone to share meals with and someone to come home to at the end of the day. That's more valuable than you know." He reached across the space between them and took her hand carefully. "I'm not your husband, Helena. I'm not going to hurt you or trap you or make you feel like you owe me anything. If you want to leave, I'll help you leave. But if you want to stay, even just for a little while longer, I'd like that very much." Helena looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused, hers smaller and still bearing the faded scars of old burns and cuts. When she looked back up, there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I'd like that too. I'll stay through the winter." Relief washed through Vincent so powerfully that he had to take a breath to steady himself. "Thank you." They finished their soup in comfortable silence, the fire crackling beside them and the snow falling softly outside. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't even really a promise of anything beyond a few more months of companionship. But it was a beginning, and that was enough. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Vincent could remember. The snow continued to fall, piling up in drifts against the barn and forcing them all to work harder to keep the ranch running. But inside the house, there was warmth and light and laughter. Helena's ribs healed completely, and she threw herself into making the house not just clean but beautiful. She sewed curtains from fabric she found in his mother's trunk. She arranged the furniture to make the rooms feel more spacious. She even talked him into repainting the kitchen a warm yellow that caught the winter sunlight. Tommy noticed the change in Vincent's mood and teased him mercilessly about it, but in a good-natured way that made them all laugh. The young ranch hand had developed a brotherly affection for Helena, often bringing her wildflowers he'd found on the range or interesting rocks he thought she'd like. Helena treated him with the same warmth, mending his clothes and making his favorite foods and listening to his stories about the cattle with genuine interest. But it was the evenings alone with Vincent that Helena treasured most. They'd taken to sitting close together on the sofa rather than in separate chairs, and sometimes Vincent would read aloud from the books his mother had collected while Helena mended socks or knitted scarves. His reading voice was deep and soothing, and she found herself less interested in the words than in watching his face as he spoke. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he found something amusing, the way his mouth shaped around difficult words with careful precision. She was falling in love with him. The realization came to her one night in early December as she watched him tend the fire, his movements economical and sure. It terrified her. She'd sworn after escaping her husband that she'd never let another man have power over her heart again, that she'd stay free and independent no matter what it cost her. But Vincent wasn't like her husband. Vincent was kind and patient and gentle. Vincent made her feel safe in a way she'd never felt before, made her feel valued and respected and seen. She wanted to stay, not just through the winter, but forever. She wanted to make this house her home, wanted to share her life with this man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved. But the fear remained, lurking at the edges of her happiness like a shadow she couldn't quite shake. What if he changed? What if the kindness was just an act, and once she was trapped here with nowhere to go, he'd become the monster she'd fled? What if she was making the same mistake all over again? Vincent sensed her hesitation, saw the way she sometimes pulled back just when they were growing closer. He didn't push, didn't demand anything from her she wasn't ready to give. Instead, he simply continued being himself, showing her through his actions rather than his words that she could trust him. When she burned dinner one night and braced herself for anger, he just laughed and suggested they make sandwiches instead. When she accidentally broke his mother's favorite vase and went pale with fear, he helped her clean it up and told her it was just a thing, and things could be replaced. When she woke screaming from nightmares about her husband, he sat with her until she calmed down, never once making her feel weak or broken. Christmas came, and Vincent surprised her by bringing home a small pine tree that he set up in the front room. Helena decorated it with paper chains and strings of popcorn, and on Christmas morning, Vincent gave her a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautiful wool coat, deep green with brass buttons, and a matching scarf and mittens. "I ordered them from the catalog in town," he explained as she stared at the gifts with wide eyes. "I noticed your old coat was falling apart and I thought you might like something warmer." "Vincent, this is too much." Helena ran her hands over the soft wool, overwhelmed. "I didn't get you anything. You've already given me the best gift I could ask for. You stayed." Vincent took the coat from her hands and held it up so she could slip her arms into the sleeves. It fit perfectly, hugging her shoulders and falling to just below her knees. "Besides, I couldn't have you freezing to death. That would defeat the whole purpose of keeping you safe." Helena turned to face him, still wearing the coat, and before she could talk herself out of it, she stood on her toes and kissed him. It was quick, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent electricity shooting through both of them. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Vincent's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs stroking over her cheekbones with heartbreaking gentleness. "Helena, I need you to know something. I'm in love with you. I think I have been since the night I found you in my barn, all fierce eyes and desperate courage. I know it's too soon. I know you're probably not ready to hear this, but I can't keep it inside anymore. I love you, and I want you to stay here not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. I want to build a life with you, a real life where you're safe and happy and free to be whoever you want to be. Helena's breath caught in her throat. Vincent, I don't know if I can. What if I'm too broken? What if I can never be the kind of wife you deserve? You're not broken. You're strong and brave and beautiful, and you've survived things that would have destroyed a lesser person. And I don't need you to be anything other than who you are right now in this moment. Vincent leaned his forehead against hers. I know you're scared. I know trusting someone again is asking a lot after what you've been through, so I'm not asking for an answer right now. I'm just asking you to think about it. Think about staying here, really staying and making this your home. I will, Helena promised, her hands coming up to grip his wrists, anchoring herself to him. I'll think about it. The winter deepened, and with it, so did the connection between Helena and Vincent. They began to touch more freely, hands brushing as they passed dishes at dinner, shoulders pressed together as they read by firelight, gentle kisses goodnight that grew longer and more heated as the weeks passed. Helena found herself thinking constantly about Vincent's proposal, weighing the risk against the reward, trying to separate her fear from her genuine doubts. It was Tommy who finally helped her make up her mind. One afternoon in late January, he came to the house for lunch and found Helena staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape, her expression distant and troubled. "Something on your mind, Miss Helena?" he asked, accepting the coffee she poured him. Helena sat down across from him, grateful for the chance to talk to someone who wasn't Vincent. "Tommy, can I ask you something? About Vincent? Sure thing. What do you want to know? Has he always been like this, kind and patient and gentle, or is it something new?" She twisted her hands together in her lap. "I need to know if this is really who he is, or if he's just putting on a show until I let my guard down." Tommy's expression grew serious, and he set down his cup carefully. "Miss Helena, I've known Vincent for 3 years, ever since I came to work here. And I can tell you without any doubt that what you see is what you get with him. He's the best man I've ever known. Fair, honest, hardworking. When my horse threw me last year and broke my arm, he took care of me for weeks, wouldn't even let me try to work until the doctor said it was healed. When old Mrs. Chen in town needed help fixing her roof and couldn't afford to pay anyone, Vincent spent 2 days doing it for free. And when his daddy was dying, mean and bitter to the very end, Vincent tended to him with the same care and patience he'd shown his mama." Tommy leaned forward, his young face earnest. "I don't know what happened to you before you came here, and I won't pry, but I do know that Vincent Hayes is not the kind of man who'd ever raise his hand to a woman. He's not the kind of man who'd lie or cheat or manipulate. If he's told you he loves you, then he loves you, simple as that. And if he's asked you to stay, it's because he can't imagine his life without you in it." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks, and she didn't bother wiping them away. "Thank you, Tommy. That's what I needed to hear." That evening after dinner, Helena asked Vincent to sit with her by the fire. He did, settling beside her on the sofa with an expression of patient curiosity. Helena took his hand, lacing their fingers together, and took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas. About staying, about marrying you, about building a life together." She met his eyes, letting him see all the fear and hope and love that was swirling inside her. "And I want to. I want to stay here and be your wife and make this place our home. I love you, Vincent. I think I've loved you since the night you found me and chose to help me instead of turning me in. You've shown me what it means to be truly cared for, to be valued and respected and cherished. and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that same love in return." Vincent's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen, transforming him from handsome to breathtaking. He pulled her close, careful of her still healing ribs, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Yes," he murmured against her lips. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in early February by the circuit judge who came through Cherry Creek once a month. It was a small ceremony, just the two of them, Tommy, and the judge's clerk as witnesses, but it was perfect. Helena wore a dress she'd sewn herself from fabric Vincent had bought in town, deep blue with lace at the collar and cuffs. Vincent wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to his mother's funeral, and he looked so handsome that Helena's breath caught when she saw him. The judge asked if she took Vincent Hayes to be her lawfully wedded husband, and Helena said, "I do," with her whole heart. Vincent slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and when the judge pronounced them married, he kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. They celebrated with a dinner at the hotel in Cherry Creek. The four of them crowded around a table and laughing over roast beef and potatoes and apple pie. Tommy gave a rambling, heartfelt toast about how happy he was to see his boss finally settling down with a good woman. And Helena blushed and smiled and felt more content than she'd ever imagined possible. That night, in Vincent's bedroom, which was now their bedroom, they came together with a mix of passion and tenderness that left them both breathless. Vincent was careful with her, conscious of her past trauma, making sure she felt safe and loved every step of the way. And Helena, freed from the fear and pain that had defined her first marriage, discovered what it meant to truly make love rather than simply endure it. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Vincent's arms wrapped around her and her head pillowed on his chest. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," Helena answered honestly. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me a life worth living." "Thank you for trusting me enough to stay," Vincent replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I promise I'll spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Spring came slowly to Cherry Creek, the snow melting in fits and starts as the temperatures gradually warmed. The ranch came alive with activity as calves were born, and the herd began moving to the higher pastures. Helena threw herself into the work, helping Vincent with the bookkeeping and managing the household while also learning more about the ranch itself. She discovered she had a knack for working with the animals, a gentle touch that calmed even the most skittish cattle. In April, Helena realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but she wanted to be sure before she told Vincent. When the doctor in town confirmed it, she rode home in a daze, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, marveling at the miracle growing inside her. Vincent was in the barn when she got back, and she found him mucking out stalls with Tommy. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. Vincent looked up, immediately picking up on something in her tone. "Of course. Tommy, can you finish up here?" "Sure thing, boss." Tommy waved them off, grinning. Helena led Vincent out behind the barn where they couldn't be seen from the house, and then she turned to face him with her hands pressed to her mouth, trying to contain the joy bubbling up inside her. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. "I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby." Vincent's face went through a rapid series of expressions, shock, wonder, pure joy, before he let out a whoop and swept her into his arms, spinning her around carefully before setting her back on her feet. "Are you sure?" "The doctor confirmed it, I'm sure. He said the baby should come in late October, early November." Helena laughed as Vincent pressed his hands to her stomach, his expression awed. "We're going to be parents, Vincent. We're going to be parents," he repeated, and then he kissed her, deep and long and full of promise. "I love you so much, Helena Hayes. You've given me everything I never knew I wanted." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer months. Helena bloomed under Vincent's devoted care, growing round and healthy as the baby developed. They spent long evenings discussing names and making plans for the nursery, transforming the spare room into a space fit for a child. Vincent built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Helena sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full to bursting with anticipation. Tommy was thrilled at the prospect of a baby on the ranch, already proclaiming himself the honorary uncle and promising to teach the child everything about cattle and horses. The community in Cherry Creek welcomed Helena fully once they learned she was expecting, the women bringing her preserves and advice while the men congratulated Vincent on his good fortune. In late October, as the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, Helena went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting nearly a full day, but Vincent never left her side. He held her hand through the pain, wiped the sweat from her face, and whispered encouragement when she was sure she couldn't go on. And then, just as the sun was setting on October 28, 1883, their son was born. He came into the world screaming his displeasure at being evicted from his warm nest, and Vincent laughed and cried as the doctor placed the squirming, red-faced infant in his arms. "He's perfect," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at his son. "He's absolutely perfect." Helena, exhausted but elated, reached up to touch the baby's tiny hand. "What should we name him?" They discussed several options, but in that moment, looking at his son's face, Vincent knew exactly what he wanted to call him. "Thomas, after my father, but we'll call him Tom after Tommy. He's been like family to us, and I'd like to honor that." "Thomas Vincent Hayes," Helena said, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, little Tom." The months that followed were chaotic and wonderful in equal measure. Baby Tom was a demanding infant, waking every few hours to eat and refusing to sleep for more than short stretches. But he was also sweet and curious, his eyes tracking everything around him with solemn attention. Vincent proved to be a natural father, changing diapers and walking the floor with a colicky baby at 3 in the morning without complaint. He was patient and gentle and completely besotted with his son. Helena watched her husband with their child and fell in love with him all over again. This was the family she'd always dreamed of, the home she'd always wanted. And when Tom smiled for the first time, a gummy, drooling grin that lit up his whole face, both parents agreed it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. Winter came again, their second together, and this time the house was filled with the sounds of a baby babbling and laughing. Tommy moved into the spare cabin permanently and hired on a second ranch hand to help with the growing workload, freeing up Vincent to spend more time with his family. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, the herd growing and the profits increasing year after year. When Tom was 2 years old, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy felt easier somehow, even though she was chasing after a rambunctious toddler while her belly swelled. Their daughter was born in June of 1886, a warm, sunny day that seemed fitting for the bright, cheerful child who entered their lives. They named her Grace, after Vincent's mother, and she was as different from her brother as night from day. Where Tom had been serious and watchful, Grace was all smiles and giggles from the start. She had Helena's hazel eyes and Vincent's dark hair, and she wrapped everyone around her tiny finger from the moment she arrived. Tom was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything and constantly asking when she'd be big enough to play with him. Vincent and Helena watched their children grow with hearts full of gratitude for the life they'd built together, for the family that had started with a desperate woman hiding in a barn and a rancher who'd chosen kindness over suspicion. Years passed in a blur of busy days and peaceful nights. Tom grew into a sturdy, reliable boy who loved the ranch and the animals as much as his father did. Grace became a fearless, adventurous child who kept everyone on their toes with her endless energy and curiosity. Vincent and Helena added 2 more children to their family, another son they named Daniel and a daughter they called Rose, and the Hayes Ranch became known throughout the region as a place of warmth and welcome. Through it all, Vincent and Helena's love never wavered. They faced droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and hard times, but they faced them together, their partnership forged in trust and tempered by years of shared experience. Vincent never raised his voice in anger, never lifted his hand in violence, never gave Helena any reason to regret her decision to stay. And Helena, for her part, became the heart of their home, the steady presence that held everything together through whatever challenges came their way. 20 years after Helena had hidden in Vincent's barn, they sat together on the porch of their expanded house, watching the sun set over the Nevada landscape. Tom was 20 now, working alongside his father and making plans to start his own ranch on adjacent land. Grace was 18 and courting a nice young man from town. Daniel and Rose were running around in the yard, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Do you ever think about that night?" Vincent asked, his arm around Helena's shoulders. "The night I found you." Helena leaned into his warmth, a smile playing at her lips. "All the time. I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd never be safe or happy again. And then I think about how you proved me wrong in every possible way." "You asked for one night," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And I'm so glad you stayed for thousands more." "Me too." Helena turned to look at him, her face still beautiful even with the lines that time had etched around her eyes and mouth. "You saved my life that night, Vincent Hayes. Not just from the law or from the cold, but from a future of loneliness and fear. You showed me what love really means, what family really means, and I'll never stop being grateful for that." "I'm the grateful one," Vincent countered. "You brought light back into my life when I thought I'd be alone forever. You gave me children and laughter and purpose beyond just surviving day to day. You made me a better man." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play and feeling the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The ranch stretched out around them, hundreds of acres of land that they'd worked and nurtured together, land that would pass to their children and their children's children. It was a legacy built on love and trust, and the simple choice to help a stranger in need. As the stars began to appear overhead, Helena thought back to that desperate flight from Virginia City, to the weeks of running and hiding and fearing every shadow. She thought about the moment she'd stumbled into Vincent's barn, bruised and broken, and sure that her life was effectively over. She'd asked for one night, planning to disappear with the dawn and never look back. But Vincent had given her so much more than one night. He'd given her a home, a family, a future she'd never dared to imagine. He'd given her himself, wholly and completely, with a devotion that never faltered. And in return, she'd given him her heart, her trust, and all the love she'd thought had died with her first marriage. "Thank you for not letting me disappear," Helena whispered, threading her fingers through Vincent's. "Thank you for staying," Vincent replied, and kissed her as the last light faded from the sky. Their children's laughter echoed across the ranch, mingling with the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance and horses nickering in the barn. Inside the house, lamps glowed warm and golden, promising comfort and safety to all who entered. The Hayes Ranch had become more than just a place. It had become a sanctuary, a testament to what could grow from a single act of compassion on a cold October night. Tom called up to them from the yard, asking if it was time to come in for dinner, and Vincent stood, offering his hand to Helena. She took it, rising with the ease of long practice, and together they walked into their house, into the life they'd built, into the love that had sustained them through 2 decades and would carry them through whatever years remained. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night and enclosing them in warmth and light and the sound of family. Outside, the wind whispered through the sagebrush and the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. And in Cherry Creek, Nevada, in a ranch house filled with love and laughter, Vincent and Helena Hayes settled in for another evening together, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the choice to stay that had changed both their lives forever.